Sign the power of attorney now. It'll make everything easier, my son said, and the ICU's machines kept their calm little arguments with the air. The attending at St. Gabriel listed complications in a voice that never panicked. Acute respiratory failure, mechanical ventilation, the kind of words that build a wall between today and tomorrow. I watched the tube disappear into my husband's throat and understood how a sheet of paper can dress itself up as a life support. My name is Laura Sanders. I'm 54. I count for a living, and I don't sign what I haven't read. But hospitals change the weather. Forms start pretending to be paramedics. Mark held a thin folder, pen uncapped, like a decision had already been made, and only my hand was late to it. It's a standard durable POA, he said softly. Bank access. I could sell the lake house if we have to. I can handle the CD if... He swallowed the end of the sentence like a pill without water. Who drafted it? I asked. Brittany leaned on the wall, scrolling her phone like somewhere inside it was a kinder version of the day. A lawyer, Mark said. Friend of a friend. He can bring a notary here. Mom, we need to act. The attending took one step closer, just enough to draw a boundary. You'll need funds. Treatment is expensive, he said. I can't advise on legal documents. The line had a stamp on it. I stepped into the hallway where the coffee machine served warm brown water and the bench remembered other families. 3 bank notifications waited on my screen like polite alarms. New device login confirmed. Transfer limit changed. Someone requested access to safe deposit box 214. While I was asleep. While Bob was intubated. I photographed the alerts and sent them to my friend and attorney, Olivia Grant, SOS. She called in under a minute. The stairwell smelled like wet paper. They're pushing a POA, I said. Bank shows a new login, a limit change, a box request. Then breathe and do these in order, Olivia said, her voice turning into rails. Sign nothing. Take pictures of every page. Ask the hospital who's been paying so far. Call North Shore Bank and flag the accounts with a physician note. You can still pay through the cashier and pull Cook County Recorder on the lake house. See if anyone filed a lien. Back at the glass, Mark straightened like a student who'd been caught peeking. Let me see it, I said, and opened the folder. Today's date. Language that tried to sound humane, irrevocable for the duration of illness. Powers that were not humane at all. Receive and dispose of funds, open and close deposits, sell real estate, including the lake house on Fox Point Drive, written with a parcel number you only know if you've eaten birthday cake in that kitchen. Who filled this out? I asked. Ian, Mark said. Ian Langley. He's a consultant. Mom, Dad needs help. I photographed every page. The POA, a HIPPAA, release tucked behind it. A blank specimen signature waiting for his hand. He'll sign at the hospital, Mark added quickly. There are notaries who'll do it bedside. He's on a ventilator, I said. Another notary can handle it, he offered, too fast. Who is another? Ian's people. I called North Shore. After the scripts, a human voice. We can restrict remote changes if the account holder is incapacitated, she said. We'll need a physician's note. Third parties can't alter access. Payments to the hospital from your card are fine. The attending signed the note with a pen that looked tired of being necessary. Brittany said, We're family, Laura, in the tone you use when you want a shortcut to look like a duty. Downstairs, behind a plexiglass window, the cashier took my card and slid back a receipt with numbers that looked like a dare. I tucked it into a clear sleeve. Order is my superstition. When the elevator doors opened, a man in a grey coat with a tidy scarf stepped out smiling with the kind of warmth you can put on and take off. This is Ian, Mark said. Consultant, he corrected gently, offering a soft handshake. Ms. Sanders, these are hard moments. I brought forms we can notarize on site. The doctor confirms capacity, you sign, and your son can pay for everything. Payment's done, I said, holding up the receipt. His smile missed a beat and caught it. Of course. Then we should unlock remaining resources. The lake house. Have you considered leveraging it? The word landed without blinking. I'll sign nothing without my own attorney reviewing the text, I said. Leave the draft. He offered a card. I sent Olivia a photo. New sole proprietor. 3 months old. No reviews. Caution, she wrote back. I went to Bob's bedside. His skin had the stillness of wax and work. Last July, he'd measured our kitchen with a tape and said grey tile like a man ordering weather. I told him no then. Today, everything felt like weather. By evening, a visiting physician wrote a note and told me what decent notaries already know. Not while he's intubated, he said. Some will. The ones I use won't. Wait until he can sign. The Cook County recorder pinged just after 8. The screen bloomed with a record. 1 month ago, a lien had been filed, a line from North Shore Bank into our lake house, securing a HELOC. The date sat exactly a week after our last weekend out there. The one where Bob stood by the fence and said he had a phone call, and I said later, and he said later is fine. I had never signed a real estate POA. Either he did this alone, or someone taught him a shortcut and called it a bridge. I sent Olivia the file. Lien, not me. Bank in the morning, she wrote. We'll pull the loan file and check signatures. If forged, police. For now, quiet. I caught their voices on the landing, Mark and Ian speaking the way men do when they think the stairwell is on their side. If she drags, there's guardianship, Ian said. Probate likes sons. The key is not to wait. He talked like this was a project plan, not a person. I stepped around the corner, and the conversation ended the way a song ends when the radio dies. I'm meeting North Shore at 9, I told Mark. If there's a POA, I'll issue it to myself. Help if you want. Don't sign for me. I didn't sleep. I watched the city blink and listened to the hospital breathe. At 3, the hallway went so quiet, my thoughts made shoe sounds. In our old thread, I found Mark asking Bob for the parcel number to check rental rates. Bob answered in under a minute. The number matched the lien. The bank lobby the next morning smelled like wet coats and cheap pastries. Olivia met me under a poster about safe deposit best practices. The manager led us into a glass office and turned her screen so we could see what she was willing to say out loud. We've restricted remote changes, she said. Payments to the hospital are no problem. We'll request the loan file and image it for your attorney. Signature pages, any POA used for collateral. She read a note. There's a tentative appointment for safe deposit box 214 at noon. Contact ends in 9134 Mark's number. He started to explain and couldn't find a sentence. Brittany tried to hand us a reason and dropped it. We only wanted to secure passports, she said. Whose? I asked. Silence is its own handwriting. The manager slid a form toward me. You can limit the box to yourself, only while we review. I initialed the places where doors disguise themselves as lines. In the corridor, Ian appeared with papers stacked like a small pyramid. Progress? He asked pleasantly. Olivia Grant, Olivia said, not offering her hand. Guardianship is prudent in uncertain times, Ian told the heir, and your son would be a natural. Courts also understand conflict, Olivia said, her smile legal size. At the recorder's satellite office, the clerk slid a photocopy of the POA through a slot. Bob's name. A clean, typed body. A signature dressed as his from before the tiny tremor. A notary seal from Lake Street. The assistant at that office confirmed on the phone. He had come alone, ID verified, no spouse required for a POA. Mark asked, small. Could he have signed it? Yes, I said. Truth has stairs. He might have thought it was temporary. Rent, July and August. Pay the interest. Fix it before I noticed. Brittany lifted her chin. We ran numbers, she said. He sent the parcel number. That doesn't entitle anyone to my name, I said. We split at the curb. Ian slid into a black sedan. Brittany said she needed to coordinate suppliers and took Mark with her. Olivia and I went to her office and wrote a motion with hands that had slept enough, an order barring any substitution under the disputed POA, freezing further drawdowns on the HELOC, and instructing third parties to stop playing telephone with my life. A PS sent a polite buzz. Home visit at 10 tomorrow. Anonymous report received and logged. Somewhere a file had learned my handwriting. A courier envelope waited at my door like a tame animal. No return address, a spousal consent, a draft agreement for sale, a sticky note in the tidy hand of a man who likes tidy outcomes. For your convenience, sign and we'll take care of the rest. I. The lobby camera showed the choreography. Courier at 5:12. Brittany on a call waving him toward my door at 5:15. Ian at 5:22, talking to the concierge and leaving with nothing. I called Mark. Don't send people to my door, I said. Don't call APS. If you care about your father, bring socks and don't talk. That night, I opened the blue notebook and tried to steady the day the way you steady a table. I wrote what had happened in sentences that could be spoken without losing breath. A new login while he was intubated. I have the screenshot. At the bank, I signed the restriction. The screen said remote changes locked. The safe deposit attempt was turned back. At the recorder's office, the lien sat on the monitor like a nail in wood. A courier came and the camera saw him. The envelope is on my counter and I took its picture. A PES is coming in the morning. The receipts are packed. The keys are in the bowl. I closed the notebook and the room stopped moving quite so fast. At 9:58 the next day, APS arrived with a tablet and the faces people wear when they aren't allowed opinions. I handed over copies, the hospital receipts, the bank case number, the capacity note. The worker wrote a sentence that helped more than it sounded like it would. Further calls will require sworn statements. Games don't like oaths. Olivia texted. The loan file had landed. In her office, we scrolled what the bank had imaged. The credit agreement, the application, Bob's passport, the POA stapled to collateral, and the line that made my ribs feel too tight. The attorney, in fact, may be substituted. A door inside a door. The bank's internal note said a call recording was attached, so we listened. Bob's voice, steady, yes. And then, almost to himself, this is temporary, not absolution, not a crime either. A man believing what he needs to believe to get through a week. Dennis, our contractor, called right after. Your husband left a $50,000 deposit for February, he said. Yesterday, a woman called from your number and asked me to refund to a card ending 9134. I wanted to confirm before doing anything dumb. Don't refund, I said. We're not cancelling. Send me the call log. Olivia added it to our stack. We filed our motion before midnight. At 12:04, Ian tried an emergency request for narrow substitution under the POA. At 1:07, the probate judge denied it and set a video status for 8:30 Thursday. Spouse continues paying. No substitution under the disputed POA. No bank contact except to provide information. 2 lines, and the night took half a step back. In the morning, the nurse whispered that he'd followed a simple command. I put a pen in Bob's hand and a small pad on the blanket. He wrote like a man climbing out of water. Wait. Then, box 214. Okay, I said. Okay. At North Shore, we opened the safe deposit box with the manager in the doorway like an officiant. Passports, a velvet pouch, a stack of papers held together by a rubber band that remembered other winters. A small USB in a Ziploc. 2 envelopes, one with my name, one stamped substitution. I opened mine last. Laura, he'd written in his fast, gentle hand. I thought I could borrow against the lake house for 1 season and pay it back with rent. Mark brought numbers with a face I recognize. Pride covering fear. Ian said families don't need windows if they trust each other. If you're reading this, either I'm not answering questions or your eyes are clearer than mine. Don't sign what you wouldn't sign in a good year. If they press substitution, wait. It looks like a key. It's a trap. His signature stood tall, ink pooling at the period like a weight. The USB held 5 audio files. The bank call. A hallway where Bob said, "I'll sign for now. July and August cover the interest." And Ian answered softly, "Exactly. If anything shifts, we substitute." A newer clip, Brittany coaching Mark to call from my number because it looks cleaner. We mirrored the drive, sealed it, wrote the time on the seal. Evidence is just paper that respects a clock. On the way back through the downtown lobby, a teller's voice filled the room with the kind of kindness that sounds like a rule. "We cannot accept a faxed substitution under a disputed POA," she said. "The spouse is present and flagged." 2 strangers looked at my son. One shook his head in that small, decent way people do when they recognize a boundary they once tripped over. That night at Café Orange, Ian unfolded a stipulation and called it narrow. "Bill pay and asset protection, nothing more," he said. "No sales without your counter-signature. In return, you agree not to weaponize bank flags." "They're breaks," I said. "Judges like cooperation," he said softly, sliding the paper closer. "Why my son?" I asked. "Because children look neutral," he answered, apologetic like a salesman. "And your daughter-in-law is organized." Olivia stirred tea 2 tables away and didn't bother to stand. "Your draft expands authority via substitution," she said almost kindly. "We have your fax header. We have the coaching audio. We have the fake notice. See you at 8:30 with exhibits. Back at St. Gabriel, respiratory therapy tried a longer trial. In the morning, they pulled the tube in one clean motion that felt like someone removing a thorn the size of a river. Bob coughed, ugly and beautiful, nodded under the oxygen mask, squeezed my hand, and wrote 2 slow words that looked like a verdict. No iron. We ran to the chapel conference room for the video hearing. The judge's square looked like mourning. The clerk took attendance. Ian sat in perfect lighting. Mark's camera framed a vending machine the way stained glass frames a saint. Olivia filed the audio, the fax header, the fake notice, the APS log. "We seek only to avoid delays," Ian said. "The spouse is overwhelmed." The judge asked Mark if he understood the difference between helping and limiting. He closed his eyes, opened them, and said, "I do now." The order clicked into place. No substitution by anyone. No bank contact except to provide information. No APS calls without oaths. Spouse continues paying. Son may carry logistics and sit the night. A nurse texted me a photo of Bob's pad like a postcard. No iron in stubborn letters. Friday, probate smelled like old wood and coffee that had forgotten to be hot. Olivia laid our exhibits in a bright row. Ian tried contrition on like a borrowed suit. "We concede the fax was overzealous," he said. "Intent was the patient's welfare." The judge's pencil didn't pause. "Mr. Langley, your initials are on the notary receipt. You authored a fabricated notice. I am referring this to the state bar and the state's attorney. Respondents' fees for opposing your midnight motion are granted. If you or anyone acting for you approaches the hospital again without written consent, I'll consider a protective order. Do you understand?" "Yes," he said, and the word didn't fit. A PS closed the file. North Shore froze drawdowns pending court order and confirmed the safe deposit rule. Appointments with me present. A branch across town declined a letter that tried to close a small CD with enthusiasm and bad punctuation. Brittany brought flowers and couldn't find my eyes. I took back the contractor card she'd tried to reroute. We were all tired of being the worst versions of ourselves. Under a glass ceiling that made winter look expensive, the bank lawyer reviewed our proposal. We asked for forbearance, interest only for 90 days, no substitution recognized, no collateral moves without my consent, early redemption allowed if we sold the lake house on our schedule. Use leverage to land the plane, not to do tricks, she said, and for once, advice tasted like food. We signed something that kept us in the cockpit. Bob came home with pharmacy bags and a bruise that purpled into an anecdote. He touched the scratch on the dining table and rasped, "Leave it." We laughed. It didn't sound like surrender. We wrote a rule on the inside of our days: signatures wait for daylight. And somewhere in Cook County, a scarf hung on the back of a chair attached to a man learning that doors can stay shut if a room decides to keep them that way. By Monday, the hospital had learned our names the way a neighborhood learns the sound of a car door. Kelsey taped a fresh IV and said, "He gets annoyed in the best way." Like irritation was proof of life. Bob mouthed a word under the oxygen cannula that sounded like coffee, and then gave me a look that admitted defeat. I lifted a paper cup to his lips anyway. 1 sip, 2, then stopped because the nurse raised an eyebrow. And I've learned to respect eyebrows more than opinions. Mark slid into the room with a stack of receipts he'd put in a plastic sleeve. "I labelled them," he said, as if the sentence itself could fix a year. He tried a smile that didn't quite clear the landing, then leaned toward his father. "Dad, you know He didn't finish. The monitor beeped a request, and the moment slipped into a drawer. Olivia called on her way up from the lobby. "Recorder flagged 2 more attempts," she said. "A family memorandum and something called a settlement notice. Both bounced." The clerk added your revocation to the front of the parcel file. It's like putting a doorman on the page. I exhaled for what felt like the first time all morning. At the desk downstairs, a volunteer with the soft power of grandmothers waved me over. "There's a woman here with a rolling case," she murmured. "Says she's a mobile notary. We told her we need you." I found the notary by the gift shop, the case by her ankle like a well-behaved pet. "Ms. Sanders?" "Karen. I was asked to notarize routine updates for Mr. Sanders," she said. "By whom?" "Ian Langley," she said, looking at her phone as if it could save her. "He scheduled 15 minutes. "Mr. Langley doesn't speak for my husband," I said. "If a notary sees him, I'm present with counsel and 2 witnesses. He's not signing while he's struggling to breathe. I can give you the court order." Her shoulders dropped a fraction. "You don't need to," she said. "I won't take the job." She snapped the case shut. "Good luck, Ms. Sanders." For the rest of the day, sunlight through the lobby glass looked like someone had remembered where to put it. Back upstairs, Bob was awake enough to glare at the paper cup and then at me, which meant he was almost himself. I set the little whiteboard on the tray. He wrote slowly, each letter a path. "Revoke POA. Me." I nodded. "When you can answer questions, we'll do it." 2 witnesses. A notary who believes in oxygen. He drew a box in the corner and left it empty, like a promise saved for later. Olivia arrived with her scarf patterned in geese that looked like they were flying in formation, even when she was standing still. "North Shore imaged the loan file," she said. "Your husband signed. Orientation questions asked. No spouse required. On page 2, our favorite poison pill. Substitution allowed." She softened her voice. "There's also a call recording. He says it's temporary. That helps with the bank. It doesn't save anyone from consequences. The hospital day stretched like old elastic." We walked Bob to the door and back, then to the nurse's station and back, and he wrote "good show" on the board because he refuses to be entirely earnest. At noon, a security guard wheeled a small camera into the family room, and the notary we trusted set up like she was about to perform a magic trick that required paperwork. 2 staffers with steady hands signed as witnesses. The attending stood by to answer capacity questions with a tone that declared an end to debates. "State your name," the notary said. He said it. "Do you understand this revokes the old document and names your wife?" "Yes." "Do you feel pressured?" He looked at me the way someone looks at a lighthouse and said, "No." He signed. The stamp kissed the page. The room remembered that ink can be clean. We walked the revocation to the bank like it was a passport at a border. The manager saw our faces and waved us into the side office without making us earn it. "We'll place this on file and add a red banner on the account," she said. "No substitutions recognized. No changes without spouse consent." She printed a copy with the banner across the top in letters that insisted. In the lobby, a small theatre played for whoever wanted to learn something for free. A man in a good suit tried to cash authority he didn't have. "It's from the spouse," he said, sliding a letter over the counter. The teller read it with a patience that was almost maternal. "Sir, this is a template pretending to be a letter," she said, using the same voice you use to tell a child that a plastic crown is not jurisdiction. "We decline." The room exhaled. The man decided to be busy elsewhere. 2 people in line found my eyes and did the small nod you do when you recognize a rule you wish you'd known sooner. Back at St. Gabriel, Mark took the afternoon shift and Brittany arrived with a bag of groceries like a treaty flag. "Soup," she said. "For later?" She bit her lip and tried again. I told Ian to stop. I blocked him. She watched the floor when she said it, which is sometimes how truth travels. "Return Dennis's card," I said gently. "No more calls pretending to be me. If APS rings your phone, say you'll swear or you'll be quiet." She nodded, cheeks pink with a kind of relief that looks like shame from far away and something better up close. Evening baked the world in the color Chicago uses when it's tired of winter. Olivia and I sat at my table with a pen that made an honest sound on good paper and wrote letters to the recorder and the bank. Formal notice of revocation, courtesy copies to the DA and the bar file. I took the elevator down to the lobby and asked the concierge to log the envelopes. He did it with the enthusiasm of a man who likes systems, because systems like him back. The next morning, the recorder called first thing. "Your revocation is indexed and cross-referenced," the clerk said. "We added a note that any attempt to record a substitution under that old power of attorney will be rejected at intake. Also, Lake County added your parcel to their alert list. If anyone tries to play hopscotch across the line, you'll know." I brought the news to Bob, the way people bring flowers. Carefully. He wrote good paper on the board and drew a small square. Then, in an act of optimism that made my throat hurt, he checked it. Mark came in with oranges and a look I hadn't seen since he was 10 and returned a lost wallet all the way to the owner. "I told Brittany I'm done with shortcuts," he said. I said the word shortcuts out loud. It sounded like taking off a jacket that doesn't fit. He looked at his father. "I'll carry receipts. I'll read the first page before I touch a pen. I won't call anyone at night to solve what daylight can solve." Bob nodded and tapped the board like a gavel. At noon, Olivia forwarded an email from the insurer. A beneficiary change request had tried to sneak through overnight. The company had frozen it, pending a live voice from Bob. "We'll do a capacity call tomorrow," Olivia said. 3 questions, 1 sentence, then done. I stood a little taller. Fraud can be clever. Policy can be elegant. The capacity call happened in a small room with a crucifix and a window that forgave no one. Stephanie from Lakeshore Life spoke like someone careful with other people's weather. The doctor offered a sentence for the file about orientation and fatigue. Bob said no to the change. No to authorizing any caller who wasn't me. Yes to listing Mark as a trusted contact for alerts. That last yes felt like he'd handed our son a compass instead of a steering wheel. On the way back to the room, we passed a volunteer with a cart of dog-eared paperbacks. Bob jabbed a finger at a detective novel he'd read twice and wrote "Mind Needs Habit" on the board. Kelsey smuggled the book under his blanket like contraband sanity. In the afternoon, Olivia took me to the recorder's satellite office to file what needed filing and watch what needed watching. The clerk behind the glass wore a sweater the color of compromise and a name tag that had been polished recently. "Your file is tidy," she said. "It's nice when somebody does it right." She looked past us at a man with a scarf I recognized and addressed her next sentence to the room. "Knowingly submitting a false instrument is a crime," she read from the posted sign, clear enough that the vowels carried to the hallway. A woman 2 places back made a small, involuntary sound that meant good. That night, the apartment felt bigger in a way furniture can't do. I cooked eggs and toast because I no longer trust feasts. When the pan hissed, I thought of the hospital oxygen and begged quietly for a connection that had nothing to do with machines. Mark came by with a ridiculous balloon animal bouquet because he'd learned that roses don't change charts and didn't want to arrive with empty hands. We laughed, finally, in a register that didn't sound defensive. Thursday, the judge's square filled the laptop screen. "Report compliance," she said without ceremony. Olivia spoke in that linen voice she uses for status. Revocation recorded, forbearance in place, lien released, insurer capacity check complete, APS file gated behind oath, DA preservation orders active. The tile labelled IL law flickered and stayed dark. The judge nodded once. "If quiet holds, leave it that way," she said. "Mrs. Sanders, no need for monthly ledgers unless there's motion practice." It was the closest thing to a pat on the back the law allows itself. Bob moved to step down that afternoon. We did a lap without the IV pole, and he gripped the railing with the reverence of a man who's dug a ditch and knows the value of handholds. At the 4th step, he stopped and looked out the window like anyone else would. "Oh, Chicago, you grey, stubborn city," and then smiled with his eyes. "Day? Light," he said. "We keep it," I answered. Perez, the DA's investigator, called on my way home. We served the shared workspace. The vendor turned over e-record logs. "Your ledger made the timeline obvious. We'll interview the notary this week. If any more mail arrives without a return address and smelling like ambition, text me and let the concierge sign for it." I promised I would, and thanked whatever bureaucratic god invented chain of custody. The next day tasted like completion. The forbearance letter on heavy paper, the lien release with a red seal, the bank's note repeating in cleaner words what the system already knew. No substitutions recognized, no collateral moves without spouse consent. I put originals in the fireproof envelope and copies where I would trip over them if panic tried to pretend it was urgency. In the evening, the concierge rang. "A courier dropped an envelope," he said. "No sender listed." He had learned our new ritual. He photographed it on the counter with his hand in the frame, then logged the time and slid it into a drawer. I texted the picture to Perez. She sent a thumbs up, and the sentence prosecutors use when they're being kind. Patterns make cases. On Saturday, Mark took the overnight, and I slept with both eyes. When I woke, the world had not been moved without me. I took coffee to the window and watched the city be itself. A bus sighing, a runner refusing to believe in wind, a kid in a puffy coat learning that ice looks thinner than it is. I thought, this is what we were protecting, not a house, not a lake. The right to have a morning that belongs to no one but the people in it. Sunday, we brought Bob home. We cleared cords and corners and made our apartment a map you could read while tired. The dining table still wore the scratch on the left edge. He touched it and rasped, "Leave it." And for the first time, I heard the sentence as a philosophy. We ate toast because victory is best digested in small bites. The blue notebook went on the kitchen counter under a magnet shaped like a goose, and the rule we wrote in the hospital came with us through the door. No signatures after sunset, not on money, not on houses, not on care. He took the pen and wrote on the first page he hadn't ruined with hospitals, "Thank you for not signing at night." I kissed my husband like a woman who knows there are papers that can choke you, and then I turned off the lamp with a hand that didn't shake. Outside, the city did its late shift. Inside, we reheated soup and practiced a kind of quiet that has nothing to do with silence and everything to do with belonging. By Tuesday, the apartment sounded like a house again. Water in the pipes, a neighbour's laugh coming through the vent, the refrigerator's small prayer. Bob slept in the living room under a throw we bought before all this. The pattern looked like someone had drawn tiny roads and then decided to leave the map unfinished. At 10, the escrow officer from Lakeside Title called with a voice that tried to be neutral and didn't quite manage it. "Mrs. Sanders, your buyers are solid. One hiccup. Our preliminary pulled a wild deed in Lake County, quitclaim from you to something called Lake House Family Shield. It's sloppy, wrong parcel suffix, notary block looks borrowed, but it clouds title. We can cure. I wanted you to hear it from me. Clouds don't kill a sale, but they change the light. What do you need? 2 things. An affidavit that you didn't sign anything, and for the clerk to issue a notice that their indexing was erroneous. We'll attach your revocation and non-consent. If the submitter tries again, it'll bounce at intake." She hesitated. "Cook already looks armoured. Someone's shopping counties." I glanced at Bob. He was awake, eyes tracking me across the room like we were playing a game we'd forgotten the rules to. "Send the language," I said. "We'll staple daylight to it." Mark showed up with a bag of oranges and a look I recognized from when he was small and had done the right thing late. He washed his hands like he was entering a lab and then sat on the ottoman. "I fired Ian," he said, before the room could judge him. "I blocked his number. I told Brittany to send anything she gets from him to Olivia or nowhere." He held out a card, Dennis's, like proof of conversion. "This is yours." "Good," I said. "Bring socks, not counsel." We walked Bob to the kitchen and back. He insisted on counting only the steps that pointed toward home. Kelsey had taught me the trick for turning stubbornness into therapy. Ask him to argue with a number. He wrote 20 on the whiteboard like a dare, then crossed it out and wrote 24, pleased to be wrong in a direction that helped. The escrow packet pinged my phone, the affidavit template, the clerk's draft notice. Olivia came by with a pen and the expression she uses when she wants my voice on the page and not the page's voice in me. "Say it the way you'd say it to a neighbour," she said. I did. We walked it to the recorder's satellite office, watched the red seal land on the lines that mattered, and added a cross-reference to Lake County that made me feel taller by a half-inch. On the way out, a small scene played 2 windows over, the kind that teaches a whole room for free. A man with a neat scarf slid a document under the glass and said, too softly for courtesy and too loudly for innocence, "It's a family understanding." The clerk read the sign on the wall out loud. "Submitting a false instrument is a crime." Her voice didn't rise. The hallway went quiet anyway. The man stood still like a photo, then chose the door that ended the moment. 2 people in line looked at me, and we had a conversation with our eyebrows that said, "Boundaries protect strangers too." We brought the news home. Bob tapped the board and wrote good paper, then drew a square and left it empty, because he knows better than to celebrate before the stamp dries. He pointed at the stove with a look that asked permission. I handed him the manual. He read the first page out loud, then laughed with his eyes at himself. "We're a cult," Mark said from the doorway, and no one argued. That afternoon, the insurer's heightened monitoring paid off. Stephanie from Lakeshore Life called the dedicated line Olivia had set up. "We caught an overnight attempt to add a secondary email to Mr. Sanders's policy," she said. "We blocked it. Because of last week's capacity call, our system escalates anything new." She paused. "The IP geolocated to a coffee shop near the courthouse." "The one with bad muffins and good Wi-Fi," I said, and she actually laughed. "Exactly that one. We'll keep your case on a manual review queue for 30 days. If you receive anything that looks like a beneficiary confirmation you didn't start, forward it to me." I hung up into a room that had decided not to need me for a minute. Bob closed his eyes and slept like a person who trusted other people's jobs. At 3:16, Cook Recorder called. "Your affidavit is recorded and cross-referenced. We added an in-person ID required notation for your parcel. Lake County is mirroring. If someone tries an e-record stunt, you'll know before we do." I thanked her by name, and when I hung up, I realized I'd started storing bureaucrats the way other people store saints. At 6, the concierge rang with the new routine I hadn't known we needed 2 weeks ago. "Envelope for you," he said. "No return address." He photographed it on the counter with his hand in the frame and slid it into the drawer where we keep packages that smell like ambition. Perez texted back in under a minute. "Runner on the way. Don't open." Olivia sent a goose emoji, and beneath it, "I like us better with rules." Dinner was eggs and toast because feasts ask for a kind of confidence I don't spend at night anymore. Mark washed dishes and didn't look at his phone. Brittany came by with store-bought cookies and no opinions, then surprised me by asking how to fold the hospital blanket so the edges match. I showed her. We did it twice and didn't talk about anything that might knock the evening off center. Wednesday smelled like clean paper. We met the title officer in a room with a fake plant that had seen better managers and signed the affidavit in a pen that makes the good sound. On our way out, we passed Ian in the lobby of a downtown building that rents quiet to people who need to look like offices. He saw us, smiled the way someone smiles when they're auditioning for Not Worried, and pretended to be very interested in the elevator call button. I didn't speak. Olivia didn't either. Sometimes the policy is silence. Perez called an hour later. "We served the shared workspace and e-record vendor," she said. "We have draft templates that look like they were cut and pasted from a blog about confidence. We have a fax log with your number circled, which is either arrogance or laziness. We'll interview the Lake Street notary tomorrow. If you get any new papers at your door, let the concierge sign and text me the photo." "Is it over?" I asked, and hated how hopeful I sounded. "It's paperwork," she said. "It ends slower than people change. But you've already won the part that matters. Your house does not move without you." The bank letter arrived on thick stock, with an emboss you can feel in your elbow. It said in plain words what the system had been doing all week. Revocation on file, no substitutions recognized, no collateral moves without my consent, forbearance in place. I slipped the original into the fireproof envelope next to the tape measure and the title policy, and put a copy in the drawer where panic can find it without turning the kitchen upside down. Midweek, we took a field trip measured in small victories. Bob walked to the hallway's end and back. No IV pole, no drama, just a stubborn hand on a railing and a jaw set like a tool. 2 neighbors pretended not to watch, and watched anyway, the way decent people do when they want to be witnesses without turning into narrators. Back inside, he wrote, "Kitchen," and I told him Saturday. He tapped the board. "Daylight," he wrote. I nodded like a promise. Thursday brought a call from Lakeside Title that sounded like air clearing. Clark issued the indexing notice. The officer said, "We attached your non-consent and the Cook file. Cloud's cured. We're ready to close Friday if your buyers want it." They did. We set the time for 11, because 11 is a number that looks like it knows how to behave. That night, a different kind of envelope arrived. Return address, real postage, a signature from the state bar on paper that didn't need to shout to be believed. They'd opened a formal inquiry into Mr. Langley's conduct. It wasn't drama, it was a docket number. I read the line that mattered twice. Respondent is instructed to cease contact with complainants and named institutions during the inquiry. Sometimes law feels like someone finally remembered to lock a door. Friday we closed the lake house. The escrow office had coffee and a view of a parking lot that didn't pretend to be a skyline. The young couple came in holding hands like a treaty they meant to honor. "We loved the morning light," the woman said. "We loved the deck, even though it needs work," the man added, which is another way of saying they loved themselves enough to do the work. "We signed without anyone hurrying us." The buyers slid a photo across the table they'd taken on their phone the day they toured. A square of sunlight on the kitchen floor, the kind that makes you think about breakfast. "We didn't want to jinx it," she said. "Now we can show you." It felt right that a house could be proof and not a hostage. On the way to the car, Mark stopped by the UPSS on Wacker and rented a PO box because the bar letter had reminded all of us that bad mail is a genre. The clerk slid the key across the counter with a nod that said he'd seen worse and wished us better. 3124, Mark said, like a password we would not forget. We took soup to St. Gabriel and told Bob the lake house had found people who would talk to it in the mornings. He wrote good paper and then, because he can't help it, drew a square and checked it. A neat little ceremony that made me want to cry and didn't make me do it. Saturday felt like we had been returned to ourselves with no warranty but a good attitude. Dennis and his crew came with the vent kit and a level, the bubble centered. He stepped back and said, "Now it's a kitchen," like a man who knows when work turns into a room. Mark handed out granola bars like he was afraid to jinx competence. Brittany wiped the counter and didn't tell it what to do. The concierge buzzed mid-afternoon. "Package," he said. "Return address is a co-working space on Wacker. Smells like cologne." He photographed it, logged the time, put it in the drawer. I texted Perez the picture and sat down at the table because I've learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let other people have their jobs. That night, we ate eggs and toast, not as superstition, as gratitude. Bob tapped the board. "What next?" "Now you walk a block," I said. He smiled with his eyes, which is his way of saying yes, and wrote "half mile by June," like a man who knows where to put his stubbornness. Sunday morning, a photo from the buyers, their dog at the deck threshold like he was practicing permission. No caption, none needed. I saved it because I've started collecting proof that ordinary is worth protecting. We took our first walk, one block, then another, stopping to let a bus sigh and a cyclist pretend he could outpace the wind. Bob leaned on my arm and pretended it was about balance. I let him. Halfway home, my phone buzzed with a property alert. Lake County again. Attempt to record, notice of temporary conservator. Rejected. Wrong form, wrong county, wrong state. The clerk's human line said, "Try probate." Or better yet, don't. I laughed out loud on a sidewalk that had survived worse. Back upstairs, Mark read the first page of the stove manual one more time because he enjoys how ridiculous that makes him feel and how safe it makes me feel. Brittany unpacked the good shampoo and set it by the sink like a flag. Bob sat at the table and touched the scratch on the left edge. "Leave it," he rasped, and I said, "I know." That evening, the window turned the river into a hallway of light. We didn't talk about courts or banks or the shape of a stamp. We talked about soup and a movie we'd both already seen, and whether grey tile would make the room look colder or cleaner. He wrote cleaner on the board and smiled. I conceded the point. Some arguments deserve to end where they started, at a kitchen counter with no witnesses and no consequences. Before bed, I took the blue notebook down and wrote the day the way a person writes a recipe she means to keep. The house stayed. The paper behaved. The people involved learned, or they didn't. And either way, it wasn't our emergency. I put the notebook back under the magnet shaped like a goose and turned off the lamp. The dark felt like a room, not a threat. Somewhere, a scarf hung over the back of a chair, and its owner looked at a calendar that had stopped giving him shortcuts. In here, the stove clicked cool, the fridge hummed like a small choir, and we slept like people whose names are on their own door. By Monday, quiet had a schedule. Morning pills, a short walk, a call from someone whose job was to keep doors locked. Investigator Perez rang at 8:10 with coffee in her voice. "We served the subpoena at the Wacker co-working space," she said. "E-record logs came over. Your timeline matches ours. 2 more. We're interviewing the Lake Street notary this afternoon. And I want a short on-camera statement from you. 15 minutes. We'll stage it so Bob doesn't spend air he needs." "Tell me when," I said. "I'll bring the blue notebook and not open it." "At 2, she said. "And keep the P.O. box. People who run out of doors use mail slots. St. Gabriel had given Bob a room that knew us." The chair caught the light. The whiteboard waited like a friendly chore. The blue pen didn't wander. Kelsey walked in with a fresh IV and a grin. "He argued about whether yesterday's lap was 30 steps or 34, she said. I sided with the nurse's counting method. Bob raised his eyebrows at me, delighted to be teased, and wrote, "Nurse wins." The attending rounded with a tone that made me feel supervised and seen. "If numbers hold, Thursday discharge," he said. "No stairs without a spotter. No forms that pretend to be emergencies." He glanced at me. "You can enforce that?" "I've been practicing," I said. At noon, the escrow officer from Lakeside Title called to say the deed had recorded clean and the funds had posted. She sounded like someone who likes her job more on days like this. "Your buyers picked up the keys," she said. "They brought a plant in a sweater." I pictured the dog at their threshold and let the image earn its place. The State Bar's investigator scheduled an intake for Wednesday. Olivia prepped me the way good counsel does. Facts, not adjectives. Dates, not feelings. What I saw, not what I guessed. "They already have your exhibits," she said. "They'll ask about pressure, not pain." At 3, the life insurer called our dedicated line. Stephanie spoke with the careful kindness of someone who knows what false urgency sounds like. "Just confirming. After last week's capacity call, we've locked beneficiary changes for 30 days unless Mr. Sanders initiates in person. We also blocked an overnight attempt to add an authorized caller. That's not a thing we offer. We flagged the IP to the DA's office." "Same coffee shop?" I asked. "Same muffins," she said, dry as paper. Perez texted a minute later, "Good call. Keep living your kitchen." I put the phone down and watched Bob nap. His chest rose and fell like a promise being kept. Mark came at 4 with a folder he'd labelled in his new handwriting, "Hospital, Week 2. He looked both sheepish and proud, the way you look when you've learned to like the part of yourself that used to annoy you. He read the first page out loud before he touched a pen. Bob wrote "Me Too" on the board and drew a square, then checked it, and Mark groaned happily. "We're a cult," he said. "Fine." Perez met me in a small family room that doubled as a chapel. She set a recorder on the table. The red light blinked once and steadied. "Say your name," she said. I did. "Tell me how you knew someone was moving money." I told her without theatre. The lock screen alerts, the cashier's receipt, the bank banner, the notary in the lobby who went home, the clerk who read the sign out loud like a line from a play she'd practiced. 12 minutes. No adjectives. When we finished, she closed her notebook with a sound I liked. "You're credible on paper," she said, "and in person." That combination is rarer than you'd hope. In the hallway, Brittany stood with a grocery bag and a look that wasn't quite an apology and wasn't quite a defense. "Soup?" she said, and I returned Dennis's card. She swallowed. I blocked Ian. "If the bar calls me, I'll tell the truth." She stared at the floor while she said it, which is sometimes the only way truth can get out. "Bring the good shampoo," I said. "Hospitals make hair feel like wire." She laughed, relieved to have been assigned something ordinary. Tuesday's recorder ping looked almost friendly. The clerk's voice on the phone had a smile in it. "Cook and Lake are in sync," she said. "Your revocation sits on top of the parcel file like a doorman. We added in-person ID required to both counties. If someone tries an e-record trick, the system will text you before it texts us." Behind her, I heard printers and a room learning to trust its own rules. At noon, a small, free lesson unfolded at North Shore's counter for anyone who needed to eavesdrop. A man in a neat scarf tried to spend a letter the teller wouldn't buy. "It's from the spouse," he said, sliding it across the marble. The teller read the line at the top, then the sign on the wall, then lifted her chin. "Sir, this is a template pretending to be a letter," she said. "Revocation on file, court order on file. We decline." The lobby exhaled. The man studied the door like it had changed and left through it. A woman in line caught my eye and smiled the smile of someone who had paid tuition to learn that policy is a poem. In the afternoon, a hospital volunteer pushed a cart of paperbacks past the door. Bob tapped the whiteboard like a child at a bakery case and pointed at a detective novel he'd read twice. Kelsey slipped it under his blanket like contraband sanity. "Brains like muscle memory," she said. Wednesday's state bar intake felt like washing a wound, uncomfortable, necessary, and kinder than pretending. The investigator's voice was neutral in a way that said respect, not distance. "We have the exhibits," she said. "We'll interview Mr. Langley and the notary, and we'll subpoena the e-record drafts we haven't seen. For your safety, consider a small PO box for 90 days. People deprived of access sometimes try your doorstep." I told her Mark had already rented one at the UPSS on Wacker. "Good," she said. "If something arrives smelling like cologne and certainty, let the concierge sign for it." Olivia filed a compliance update with the probate court. Revocation recorded. Forbearance in place. Lien released. Title clear. Insurer capacity check completed. APS file gated behind oath. DA preservation orders active. The clerk stamped it and slid it back with the tiny nod of a person whose job improved that day. By evening, the apartment had learned to be ours again. We boiled water and didn't try to make meaning out of it. Mark brought a ridiculous bouquet shaped like a balloon animal because he'd learned what not to bring and needed a replacement. We laughed in a register I'd missed, the one that sounds like a room remembering itself. Thursday, Bob came home. We turned the hallway into a map you could read while tired. Cords taped down, rugs flattened, pillbox on the counter like a calendar that tells the truth. He sat in the living room and touched the arm of the chair the way you greet an old friend you thought you might have lost. On the whiteboard, he wrote, "You made it," then crossed out the pronoun and wrote, "We made it," then added daylight in tall letters that looked like a steeple. The first night home was inventory and mercy. We filled the pill organizer, 3 small walks from couch to door and back. One story told twice, because the first telling didn't use up the goodness in it. Mark arrived with frozen soup and the confidence of someone who had learned which beeps want panic and which beeps want patience. Brittany put the good shampoo by the sink and didn't say a single sentence that began with, "You should." Friday's status call with the judge was not a battle. It was a roll call for compliance. Olivia spoke like linen, simple, clean, no static. Revocation of POA recorded and served. Bank acknowledges restrictions and forbearance. Lien released. Title clear. Insurer capacity check done. Policy unchanged. A PS file gated behind oath. Date preservation in effect. The tile labelled IL Law never lit. The judge nodded once. "Fees on affidavit," she said. "Bar and DA are out of my lane. Parties will stop communicating outside counsel. Mrs. Sanders, no need for monthly ledgers unless something moves." It was the courtroom version of a pat on the shoulder. After, the recorder pinged again. Our own filing clearing through Lake County. The indexing notice cross-referenced, the affidavit attached, the cloud cured. The clerk's human line said, "Sleep, please." I tried. Perez texted just before dinner. "Search executed at the shared workspace," she wrote. "We seized family settlement templates and a fax log with your number circled. No arrests today. We build cases like you built your kitchen, 1 level bubble at a time. Keep the P.O. box. If flowers arrive, let the concierge be the florist." Kelsey, off shift, chimed into our family thread with her nurse's sense of humour. "If flowers, then sharps bin." Mark answered with 10 laughs and an orange emoji because he'd decided fruit could be a personality. We didn't go out to celebrate. We stood at the stove like people who had earned ordinary. Eggs and toast again, not out of superstition, out of gratitude you can chew. Bob ate half an egg and wrote grey tile on the board with the stubbornness of a man who wins his arguments patiently. "Grey tile," I said out loud. He underlined the words and drew a square. He didn't check it. Some victories like to be invited twice. Saturday. We walked the hallway twice and the block once. The city did what cities do when no one is pointing at them. Buses sighed, dogs negotiated doorways. A cyclist tried to outrun the river's wind and learned a lesson he'd forget tomorrow. We counted breaths without counting. Halfway home, my phone buzzed with a property alert from Lake County. A notice of temporary conservator had been rejected. Wrong form, wrong county, wrong state. The clerk added, "Try probate. Or better yet, don't." I laughed out loud and read it to Bob like a bedtime story. In the afternoon, I found a thin envelope in the P.O. box with no return address and a handwriting that tried to look like a schoolteacher's. The concierge had already logged it and photographed it with his hand in the frame. Inside, photocopies of family photos. Bob at 20 with a fish. Mark at 5 with cake on his cheek. Me in a blue dress squinting at sun. On top, a note. "Families should trust each other. Sign, and we can all rest." The paper smelled faintly of cologne that had tried too hard. I slid the stack into a plastic sleeve labelled "Sentiment" as leverage, declined, and texted Perez the picture. She replied, "Logged. Patterns make cases." That evening, the buyers sent a photo of their first morning at the lake house. Light on the kitchen floor, a mug, the dog in the doorway like he was practicing permission. It didn't make me sad. It made me believe in the part of this country that works. You get a deed in your name, and tomorrow belongs to you until you decide otherwise. Sunday was church by routine, if not belief. Pills, vitals, a walk. The blue notebook open on the counter under the magnet shaped like a goose. We wrote the day the way people write a recipe they plan to keep. The house stayed. The paper behaved. The people involved either learned or didn't, and either way, it wasn't our emergency. At dusk, the river turned into a hallway of light. Bob tapped the board. What next? Next, I said. We framed the ledger's first page. He made a face that pretended to hate the idea and didn't. Kitchen, I said, above the counter. He tapped the cap of the marker against the board like a gavel and wrote, "Daylight one more time," then underlined it twice, because some words earn their lines. Monday started with the sound of our apartment remembering us. Kettle, radiator, the quiet click of a pillbox lid. Bob made it from the couch to the window without asking the air for permission. He sat in the light and wrote, "Half mile by June." Again, bigger this time, like a word you intend to live inside. Perez called at 9. We pulled hard drives from the co-working space, she said. Drafts, fax headers, coaching scripts, the whole playbook. No headlines yet. We build quietly. I could hear a printer in her background doing its steady work. If anything new touches your door, let your concierge be the witness. I like it when the world has procedures, I said. Me too, she answered, and hung up to go believe in them somewhere else. At noon, the bank manager slipped me an envelope like a small favor. Inside, a short, plain letter repeating what good paper had already taught us. Revocation on file, no substitutions, no collateral moves without my consent, forbearance active until date certain. I put the original in the fireproof envelope next to the tape measure and the title policy, because some objects deserve to live together. Mark took the night shift and learned he likes the sound of a city at 2 a.m. when it isn't asking him to be impressive. He came home with hospital coffee and a smile that didn't need a job. Nurse Kelsey says my charting is not awful, he said. Bob wrote promotion on the whiteboard and underlined it twice. Tuesday, the state bar sent a note that didn't try to be dramatic. Formal inquiry opened, contact with complainants and named institutions prohibited, additional interviews scheduled. Olivia forwarded it with the one sentence she knows I read twice. We keep going, even when we're already safe. I printed the letter and let the page cool in my hands before filing it where panic could find it later and leave us alone. Midweek, the young couple at the lake house sent a picture of the deck, half sanded, half stubborn. "We're doing it ourselves," the message read. "Feels good to be sore." Bob laughed, coughed once, and pointed at the word "good" on the screen as if it were a diagnosis. On Thursday, we walked farther than we'd promised. The river was a sheet of hammered light. The wind tried its old tricks and lost. Bob leaned on my arm without pretending and counted only the steps that pointed toward home. A stranger's dog stopped at our ankles as if it had business with us, then decided we were fine and pulled its owner toward the future. When we got back, a slim envelope waited in the PO box. The concierge had already photographed it, logged the time, and placed it in the drawer that smells like toner and restraint. Perez texted back 3 words, "On my way." She arrived in a jacket that had been in cars and slid the envelope into a larger one with a practiced hand. "He saves everything," she said about people like Ian, and somehow it sounded like justice, not gossip. Friday's forbearance check-in with the bank was the opposite of drama. A handshake, a calendar note, a call us if you want to redeem early. On the way out, a teller said to a man in a decent suit, "Sir, we don't take faxed substitutions." And the line learned something for free. I thanked the manager by name. "Policy saved me a trip," I said. She smiled the small, tired smile of someone who likes the days when rules are kindness. The kitchen became a room again, not a project. Dennis installed the last trim piece and stepped back. The levels bubble found center with the satisfaction of an answer key. "Now it looks like it always meant to be this way," he said. Bob wrote grey tile one more time and grinned. I held up 2 samples in the window light and surrendered in daylight on purpose. We ordered the one that made the room look like it could forgive anything. Saturday, Mark and Brittany came over with a bag that clinked like dishes and smelled like ordinary. She set the good shampoo under our sink and the good soap next to the faucet and didn't offer a single opinion I hadn't asked for. Mark read the first page of the tile install instructions before he touched a tool. Bob raised his eyebrows at me and wrote "convert" on the board. I nodded. Some faiths you don't have to name. In the afternoon, the state's attorney's office sent a 1-line update. Preservation orders extended, interviews next week. Thank you for your patience. It felt like someone straightened a picture frame in a room I wasn't in. Sunday, we framed the first page of the blue notebook. Mark rolled his eyes. Bob pretended outrage. I hung it above the counter anyway because rooms should remember what they held. The frame caught a square of morning light and kept it like a promise. Bob tapped the glass with the end of his pen. "We made it boring," he rasped, and smiled the way people do when boring is the best word in the language. We ate eggs and toast at the scratch on the table he told me to leave. The city did what cities do when no one is narrating them. I washed the pan and turned off the burner and stood very still. The house did not try to move without me. My name sat where it belonged. The door was locked because we decided it would be. And somewhere, a scarf hung on the back of a chair in a room that had run out of shortcuts. What would you have done in my place?